our backgrounds and explain, why we're here today and doing the workshop. So I'm Orla and I met Deirdre Wile when we both worked in O'Neill Sportswear in Strabane. Deirdre was on the design side and I was on the commercial side, working with some of the bigger contracts, but also heavily involved in the production and management side. I left O'Neill's about a year ago, and at the minute I'm working in medical textiles. Very different, very niche part of the market and a very highly regulated textile industry. Totally different to sportswear and all the polyester-based fabrics and things like that, and production in Ireland, vertically integrated production, which O'Neill specialise in, which is great. Medical textiles has really come about during COVID because of all the use of disposable PPE. Just went overboard in terms of how much was procured and brought in from China, and the whole pressure on the market where they couldn't find appropriate medical textiles. So hopefully we'll see that as a big part of the landscape here in Ireland going into the future. And then myself and Deirdre are also collaborating on another project at the moment. So I'll hand over to Deirdre just to talk about her background now.
Well, my degree is in textiles and fashion. I have a postgrad in computing and design. So predominantly my life background has been in design, but I've also worked in retail, and I worked, as I say, with Orla in O'Neill. So we have quite a strong background in the actual manufacturing process. So that's what we're going to cover today. And just to kind of, if anybody's interested in a PDF version of what we're doing, we can send that on to John so that you're not maybe scribbling away. I know you're going to scribble away at all the important information that we have. But I'm going to just let Orla maybe start and take it off from here.
Just a health warning about the slides. I don't like slides that are wordy, but the reason the slides are so wordy today is we wanted them to be really a playbook for whenever people go off and start doing this process. And not everybody's ready to start the process today. Potentially, students or people that are studying at the moment, it's a wee bit away for them. So hopefully this will be a presentation that will have a bit of use in the future. And people that are maybe, we've spoken to a few people this morning that are just making tentative steps. So as they progress, hopefully the notes will be more useful. So you'll see there's a lot of words and a lot of content on each of the slides. So just in terms of navigating the process, okay, Connor? Yeah. Clothing and textile manufacturing is a global business. We heard very well this morning about how great an industry it was here in the 18th and 19th centuries in the Northwest. But generally speaking, that has all moved now to China, to India. And I suppose they're two of the bigger countries in terms of manufacturing. Turkey would be probably the biggest in Europe, and Cambodia would be one of the other big players. So they would be the four main sort of manufacturing hubs for clothing and textiles at the moment. Okay, John? So you'll see every garment will have something about where it has come from, and it gives you a story about the brand. If you buy something from Chanel, you probably don't expect it to be made in Cambodia, and you can see there's a made in Italy. So you really can make associations about a brand and what they're about and what their value proposition is. When you look at where they're manufacturing, that's one of the first things probably that we do within the industry. Where's this made and where's the fabric come from? And you touch and you feel and you get that whole experience. Okay, John? But I suppose the question that we're here today to answer is, where do I start in this process? Because of this global nature of the market, it's huge. How do I get out there and find the right country to manufacture my product? I'm at a very early stage. So what we're going to try and do is give some resources towards the end, but really talk you through the whole process and see if, that'll be a suitable path. You might be at a different stage in the process at the moment. So hopefully you'll be able to pick up on some useful tips. Okay. Oh gosh, that doesn't read well, but really, where do I start? You start with your brand. What is the brand about? What are you about? What values do you have? And many people will sit down and say, I'm slow fashion, I'm seasonless, I'm about sustainability, I'm about fast, I want to have a lot of products. So everyone has a different perception of what their brand's about. But very importantly, what do their customers want from your brand? So if you're going to actually get an audience and people that will follow you and buy from you year on year, what do they want? And maybe it's an important part of your whole brand exercise is to sit and look at the type of customer that I'm aiming at. If it's somebody in their 40s with maybe more disposable income, what are they looking for? Well, they probably don't want the fast fashion. They're not looking to buy something for £20. So then that shifts my whole focus and emphasis as I go to look at the countries that I might want to manufacture in. I'm not looking for the cheapest. I'm looking for something with more features, with more benefits in a garment or a textile. So all of these things need to be put on paper. Am I about sustainability? Well, you really can't be about anything else nowadays. It's a key part. of manufacturing and staying in business, and it's going to become more and more important. We all have to ask ourselves about how much we buy, how much we throw away, what end of life is. So these things are all key as you sit and plan for your brand, and all of that then will be key factors that come into the decision-making process around which factory and suppliers you choose to work with. So just in the background there, the made in Donegal, or Donegal socks made in Ireland. We are familiar with these brands, and they will be coming more and more to the fore. The smaller brands that aren't putting out lots and lots of volume, but that are producing higher priced, good quality, and it's coming from, you know, a closer manufacturing market. Okay, Connor. So in terms of what are the options, and I suppose they can be really encapsulated into three main things. It's local production, very, very little of that on the island, unfortunately. But in the UK, we're seeing a really good investment, and I think Deirdre touched on that this morning. The north of England is seeing a lot more clothing manufacture, even London. So there's definitely options there for brands to look at. And we have given a good website at the end, just as a starting point to look at. The other thing then is the nearshoring option, which is a lovely option for a brand to consider. Maybe going to somewhere like Portugal, Italy, even Turkey, where the quality is really good, the access to fabrics is good, you're going to be close to the market, and I'll talk about some of the pros and cons of working with a nearshore market. And then the offshoring, so that's going to these much further afield markets, China, India, Bangladesh, and Cambodia, as I've already touched on, which have a completely different offering. I'm not saying they're bad or good, but it's just that could be right for some brands, and it could be right for other brands to be local and to be much closer to their manufacturing. Okay, Connor. So just to touch now on some of these pros and cons as you come into the decision-making process. And if we talk now about the local, maybe the UK, the Turkey options, real brand advantages in that. I don't think anyone's going to be embarrassed to put a made in England label or to have that on their product, to have made in Portugal, to made in Italy, because we see those countries as close to us, regulated industries where they're paying their staff the right wages, where the working conditions are good. So that's all something that a brand can say, well, I'm proud to have that country make my clothes. That risk of, you know, exploited labour and really having to interrogate and inspect your factory and your production, a lot of that's removed because of the regulation at a national level. And certainly if you have any concerns, there's lots of routes you can go to actually address those. So that takes away a big worry for us. And we've seen too many brands over the years, some of the big ones, be exposed on using cheap labour, on, you know, children manufacturing and all of that. And that unfortunately is more part and parcel of the Far East manufacturing processes. No duties within Europe, and then obviously we have, you know, to take into consideration Brexit in the UK in terms of some charges and so on there. But generally speaking, the shipping costs, everything else are going to be much more affordable. So where you may save on shipping, you know, it has to be factored in because those shipping costs at the moment, I'll come on to that, in China are very high. Minimum order quantities can be lower, and this for small brands starting off is really important. You probably don't have the budget to go out and buy 10,000 in 5 or 6 different sizes in maybe 2 or 3 colorways. So if someone can do a much smaller run for you and be responsive then as you need top-up runs, that's going to be really attractive to you starting off. Some of that potential won't be there with buying with the Chinese market. It will be high volume minimum orders, which is difficult, costly to invest in. And you can probably visit the factory, you know, we've been on holidays to Turkey, Italy, all of these places. It's not without, you know, out of the realms of possibility that you make a 1 or a 2 day trip to see these places, to see the production, to sit down and talk to people that are involved in the process, which is really, really nice. And especially as you try to grow a relationship with a brand, that can be really helpful. You're less likely to have communication issues. They're probably within a lot of these factories, certainly ones we've dealt with in Portugal and Turkey and so on. They have someone who's the key point of contact for the English-speaking population, so you build a good relationship with them and they understand our culture more so, and there's no issues, I suppose, with time zones and things like that. But on the reverse side, I suppose there is always the few negatives, and the production costs can be higher. We're, you know, typically going to be looking at maybe wages of £10 an hour minimum or €10 an hour. So, you know, it's more like our market here where we're paying, you know, 13, 14 euro an hour maybe in Ireland. So you're going to see that in your cost of the product. And it is a smaller group of manufacturers that you'll have access to. So some of them will specialise in certain things, and the north of Portugal will have quite a number of manufacturers, but again, tiny in comparison to somewhere like China or some of the other big countries that are producing garments. So then the pros and cons of offshoring, again, thinking of the volume product, and if you've got a product to bring to market that you need volume, it is certainly somewhere you're going to have to visit. Very large number of manufacturers, so large, in fact, it can be quite dizzying to look at. Where do I start? What country do I start with? How do I do my research? So that can be difficult and time-consuming to navigate. But they can deal with much larger volume orders. It's not going to scare them if you go looking for thousands of pieces. It's not going to be a big bump in the road for them, which is important if you have a plan to launch a brand and you need to get a large volume of product ready. Production costs are lower. Yes, we know the reasons behind some of that, so we need to be very careful in terms of who we're dealing with. But generally speaking, it's lower wage economies. And it's because wages are lower, it means that more complex designs, more complicated, more features on a garment or whatever it might be, will be more achievable in terms of cost price for you because the cost for labour is lower. But there's a lot in red here, as you can see, and there are things we can't shy away from, and we need to know we're the name on that product that we're putting out. It's our reputation, it's our own personal brand, as we hear more about every day now. So, are we satisfied and does it sit well with us? If we don't know the whole thing of, are they paying their staff well? Are the factory hours and operating conditions good and acceptable? And, from a long way away, sitting in Ireland, can you assure yourself of what they're telling you is correct about how they're operating their factories? But you have to take all that into consideration. The higher minimum order quantities doesn't suit everyone. Starting off as a brand, you may not have the money to invest in a lot of stock. So that's an issue if you can't meet those minimum order quantities, and they won't speak to you if you are shying away from those kind of numbers. And then the higher shipping costs. So pre-COVID, shipping was a lot cheaper. You can see there 360% increase in shipping costs. Now, they have come down slightly in more recent times, but that's a real challenge because getting the product to you isn't just what it was. You need to factor your shipping in right from the start. And if it's fluctuating, is your price and your margin able to cope with that fluctuation as it's going on? A big thing to flag up about the China and the India markets can be the longer production times and the shipping times. Obviously, when something gets on a boat and it's coming here and it takes 4 to 6 weeks, that can be tricky as you try to launch products. But you are seeing continued impact from COVID in China. You'll see it all the time on the press and in the media. They are just shutting down cities. They're shutting down because they have a zero COVID policy. So ultimately that's affecting industry and affecting factories and could affect your timescales when you go in and you promise a certain lead time with them. Environmental issues, they're coal-burning nations. They rely heavily on coal. That's a consideration for us. Here we're trying to decarbonise all of our production and move to more environmentally friendly options. In terms of running these big factories, they are heavy resource on the environment, and it's something to think about as well as to whether that sits well with your brand. You'll have all the customs issues and challenges to deal with, and a lot of people won't have dealt with these at any scale, and something that you'll have to probably get help in on, but if you don't have the direct experience. Language and communication, again, there will be people in the factories that will speak English, but it can be more difficult, and depending on what factory you identify first and foremost, you may not just be able to communicate with them as easily as you might over here. And the currency fluctuations, the dollar, the euro, we know all of these are fluctuating. Likewise, global currencies are fluctuating. So again, this is all about how you're protecting yourself. If you're buying at a price and then this deal doesn't start and your production doesn't start, and maybe upfront payment terms, and you need to look at all of those. What's the impact of a currency fluctuation here, and could it really make my product unsustainable within the market by the time it arrives in? And if you're buying in big minimum order quantities, when all of that arrives in the container and you have all of these pallets arriving, you have huge warehousing costs and storage costs, and that needs to be safe and secure and weatherproof and all the rest. So sometimes it's easier to manage. Small orders arrive and you can manage that within, family or sort of contacts warehousing or good storage. But certainly if you've got a container load arriving from China, you need to think about where's this all going to sit until it's out with the customer. Okay, Connor? So imagine now we've made the decision, we've honed in on the country, we've thought about our brand, we think, okay, I'm more likely to look at European manufacturers, I'm more likely to look at China, I need low cost. What then helps me to get that short list of how I decide what factories to go with? So communication, again, so important. This is somebody in the factory that's going to be working on your behalf to get a product for you, to you in the time scale that you need. Are they coming back to you? You know, the very first interaction, and Deirdre and myself really gauge this with, do they answer you quickly? You know, do they give you the answers that you've asked for? Because that's typically what you'll see, where you've asked one thing and you're getting some other information that's standard boilerplate information that they just send out to everybody that asks a question in English, and that's not really what you're about, and that's wasting time for you. And if you go back on that, well, do they then see, okay, I've got a real serious prospect here, are they going to give me the information? So you will find factories just drop off and you just think, right, they're not for me, they're not coming back, they're not what I need. And that's good, because the quicker you cut through all of that, the better for you as a brand. Very important, are they taking new customers? So if they've got a full schedule of production and they can't take you for 12 months or whatever it might be, that probably doesn't fit within your own plans. So again, that may rule them in or out as to whether you would consider them for a short list of producers. And what services do they provide? Another key one, you know, are they cut, make and trim? Are they going to provide a full service? So they'll do everything. So if you're very new to the whole business of manufacturing textiles and fashion, can they do all the support services along the way? Can they help you source the fabric? Can they actually get a better deal on the fabric than you can, because maybe they're buying for other manufacturers? So all of those things are part of those early day discussions with the manufacturers. And then, are they scalable? So let's say you start off with a small run, it goes really well, everybody's really happy, you've sold out of all your mediums or all your larges and you need them filled really quickly, you've got a waiting list. Do they then respond quickly to that? What have they done typically in the past? It's going to be a good sign of what they're likely to do in the future. So you need to speak to other customers of theirs just to see what their experience has been on that side of things. Again, the minimum order quantities comes in, you know, the 500 of the size medium, large, extra large, plus one colorway. If those are the sort of minimum order quantities, you'll know right away, I can't cope with that amount of stock. It's not for me. So they're not going to be on your short list. And time zone, it's not a big thing, but it is a consideration. You know, if they're going to be on a different time zone, they're working through the night. When the deadlines are starting to hit and we have to turn things around, they ask a question, you're not online again for another 12 hours. All of those things really delay the process. So you're in this business, you're going to be, that's the reality of it, working around the clock, and it's just to kind of realise that that's the reality. Okay, Connor, yeah. Will they give a precise address? We've come across plenty of them that look like factories, sound like factories, send out stuff that like factories, but they're not actually factories. They're buying in bulk and they'll do a certain amount of finishing, maybe labeling for you, maybe packing, whatever it might be, but they're not able to break down a product and make it from scratch. And, you know, generally you'll unearth those people and you'll see, no, there's something not right here. They can't do this very small change that I want something. You just get to know who's not a factory and who is. You need an address, you need to be able to go on to Google Earth, you need to be able to look, you need to be able to ring the embassy and say, do these people exist? You need to do all of that due diligence. It's so important, because don't go 6 months down the line with somebody that you think is right for you and find then, oh my goodness, you know, they're not actually there. That's a front for a business, and it happens. So just, you have to be aware of that. Checking your samples very close. So the initial sample that you receive from a factory isn't likely probably to be your own product. It's going to be something they made for someone else, something that you've asked to see a sample of their work. What is it like? You know, are you happy with the quality? Are you happy with how it looks, feels, everything else? Have you washed it? Have you tried it out, worn it, whatever it might be. So that's a key place, because you'll start to see then, no, these guys can do really technical work, they can do the detail that I need, or they can't, and you'll be able to rule them in or out. And part of that is obviously, do they work to an ISO standard, 9001 or whatever it might be, and some factories will be very upfront and you'll be able to get all that information. And if they don't have that, I suppose you're seeing then maybe there's going to be processes that aren't probably, going through the full regime of what you would like to see in a factory. Total transparency in all fees, because you don't want a shock at the end that there's an extra £300 charge for this, or there's an extra £1,000 charge for that. You want to see the worst case scenario up front as early in the discussion as possible. And currency, what currency are we dealing with? So we're working with Turkey, but we're dealing in US dollars. So you need to know all of that, because you have to be breaking your numbers down and working on your numbers and understanding them. And then the names and contacts of prior customers. Yes, you'll say they can fake it and give you someone that, you know, maybe they've primed, or so you need to really check multiple customers. You need to interrogate them about when, and, you know, was it the same management team? Was it the same structure? Were they dealing with similar staff? All of those questions. You know, are they still working with this factory? Have they moved on? And, you know, generally just trying to do as much, again, of the due diligence as you can, because if they can't give you multiple customers' names, there's, you know, it would raise concerns with you right away. Okay, Conor? And just a couple of other quick points. Deirdre is going to cover the critical path just in terms of delays, but there'll be many of them, and there'll be ones that you haven't thought about, and there'll be adverse weather, and there'll be COVID, and there'll be, you know, the whole production was closed down. There was holidays that aren't the same holidays as the country you live in, all the different calendars to take into consideration, Ramadan and Chinese New Year and all of that. You will experience all of these, and they will hit in the middle of when you think your production's all happening, and it's just, no, we're not changing this. They won't change it. That's their tradition and custom, so they will impact you. But as long as you've built them in at the start, it's not an issue. Have a strong tech pack, and Deirdre's going to really focus in on that for us now, because that is a key part of the process. And find a good clearing agent if you feel you need that and you haven't got that expertise within your business. And then think about your storage and warehousing early on. Don't book it too soon, but make sure that you've got something that's accessible, that's affordable, that's going to be, you know, work in terms of how you need to distribute your product out to your customers. And I've mentioned that not all clothing manufacturers, but I can't stress that enough. Just be aware of them. And then probably more so within maybe the China, the India manufacturing processes, using a local inspector. And it's easy enough to identify these, and they will go in and be your eyes and ears in the factory. They'll go in more usefully early stage process when they're starting to make the garments initially. So you can see, right, if something isn't working and you're going, oh my God, if I end up with 1,000 of these, I'm not going to be able to sell them. So you can get everything stopped and, you know, just do a relook at what's happening and find out why the factory has gone down that route or whatever it might be. But it's, especially if you're buying big volumes, it probably pays for itself. We wouldn't want to open a box when it's arrived on a container and find this isn't what I thought it was going to be. Okay. Hand over to Deirdre now. Sorry, that was a whistle-stop tour, but hopefully some useful points.
Well, this is going to be go two ways. I'm either just going to start rattling on and it'll be like 20 minutes an hour and nobody's going to understand a word said, or I'm going to go off on a tangent and start chatting about the Kardashians or something. So, but anyway, we'll just see how it goes. Conor, do you want to do? So everybody here has their idea. That's why you're here. You're all like into fashion and textiles, and you just all want to do production. So Conor, if you want to flip it on. So yeah. So what type of factory do you need? You need a factory that will go to your specifications. So there's kind of like two ways you can actually play this. There's choosing a CMT, which is cut, make, trim, producer, and they predominantly will need your tech pack. There's also people that will fully do the whole package for you, all right? So I'm going to cover those two options in the next couple of slides. But basically, there's factories that will take, if you want to just go to the next slide, Conor, just sorry. This is kind of an idea of, I was working with a company as well, and she wanted it sort of microwaved as on the production pack. She hadn't got time, so she said, to do, you know, the whole laying out and everything perfect and perfection. So basically come together with some ideas of a outerwear garment that she wanted. So that's the kind of idea she wanted. She wanted one with a belt, she wanted a puffer. So the idea was to give the factory some images and then actually give them a breakdown in text of what, you know, she was looking for. And that was sent to outerwear factories. You know, you don't send an outerwear pack to a pajama factory, because although they might say they can do it, which I have heard them like say, oh, we can do that, because they nearly grab everything that you want to do. But it's going to be more expensive because they don't have the facilities. They're probably going to outsource it anyway to somebody else. So if you're looking for an outerwear, go to an outerwear factory, all right? Ask them for some samples, get what they've done before, and that's your starting point. See what quality they have. You know, they're going to, hopefully they'd send you the better quality of garment that they have. So, you know that's a starting point. It probably isn't going to get a whole lot better than that, you know, really. And if that's good enough for what you want to do, brilliant. If it's not, then you move on to the next supplier and try and get another sample. But you can cobble together a tech pack by just sending them, listen, I want, this is the lace idea, this is where it comes from, giving them as much visual information, and then they can, culminate that. And I've seen it done actually very, very well. I'm not saying anything against it, but it is, you are taking on board, they're coming up with the creativity, and they're taking the direction, and they're kind of more, and you have to be very flexible. What you get is what they've interpreted as. So, it really is their interpretation. So if you go on to the next slide, Connor, then you're down, this is what it should be, if you like. This is a tech pack. This should be every single detail. So if you're in charge, this is your idea, this is your creativity, you should be able to put that on a page in a way that tells every single detail for that garment. So you've got your tech pack, you've got a breakdown of all the fabric, you've got a breakdown of all the trims, you've got the washing instructions, you've got every detail that's on that pack will illustrate to the manufacturer what you want. Connor, if you want to move on to the next page. So again, this is like a breakdown of just the design aspect of it. So Connor, if you want to we'll just kind of rattle through these. So like the main picture, the front of the tech pack should be a black and white version of what you want. And it's very clean and clear so that the manufacturer instantly knows this is what you want. You want to put your logo on. You want to actually, that piece of paper then becomes your copyright. This is now your design. This is what you want. You want to give them as much information as well. So it's what season it's for, what it is, what you're calling it. So you give it a reference as well so that when you ring them up or email them, it's more predominantly email now that we'd have correspondence. So, that quickly you can reference what you're talking about, and if you can give them the visual aid as well in every single email, then communication is a lot clearer and a lot more coherent. You want to go to the next page, Connor? So again, next page would be just a breakdown of the actual fabrics. So this isn't actually the color of it, this is just, they represent the different fabrics. So yellow is a self fabric, so it's probably a fleece in this circumstances. Then you've got a 1x1 rib for the cuff, and then you've got like the trims, the toggles, and etc. You want to go to the next one, Connor, please? So again, it's given them as much information. So the next page is a total breakdown of all the stitching involved. So that, do you want top stitch? Do you want an invisible top stitch? Do you want, where is everything positioned? How does it look like? This is a two-piece hood. Maybe you want a three-piece hood. So, it's just giving them every single piece of information that you can possibly give in that illustration. So Connor, if you want to move to the next. So again, breaking it down even further, the pockets. And you might think, well, I don't need to give them that. That's too much information, I have too much time. The next thing you see, the pocket comes, and believe me, I've seen it where, you've given them a drawing and you think they should know. No, you get a tiny little pocket maybe and you can't even get your hands on it. That's your fault. You haven't given them enough information. They've just, yes, they want a pocket, I'll just stick this one on. And, they're not wrong, but, that's not what you wanted. That's time, energy, you've paid for a sample. Oh, it's just, everything's time. So this actually eliminates a lot of time, and it just makes you then that you're getting more quality out of the products that you're actually getting, all the samples. Connor, if you want to move to the next one, please. Again, another close-up, just give them everything, the width of the band on the collar, just break it right down, just so that they get as much information as possible. Again, there's Connor, thank you. This is a really important one. I know it's kind of the thing, well, I want my logo to be on the chest. I've seen it where it's up here, and it could be anywhere, because maybe the drawing, it sort of looks a wee bit skewied, or if you don't give them the exact position of where your logo or your identity or whatever it is, a badge perhaps, or even if it's just a graphic on the body, you have to give them the position. They have to know where to put it, and it's your fault if you haven't given them that information. If you have given them that information and it comes and it's up here, then you don't have to pay for that. That's for them. They shouldn't have sent that. They need to send you another sample showing exactly where that logo should be and the position of it. You want to go on to the next one, please? And again, it's just the positioning of the inside label. I know it sounds so simple. If you go to the next one, sorry, Connor, as well, it's just the care label. I had 2,000 pieces for the original factory shop. And one night I just woke up and I went, I didn't put a care label on that pack. I don't know why. I can remember it like it was yesterday. I have a very bad memory, so even yesterday's bad one, but I can remember waking up in the middle of the night going, I didn't put a care label on that jumper. And they had the whole 2,000 made without care labels, and you'd be thinking, everything has a care label. Why wouldn't I put a care label? They never asked, they never said, they never did it. So it doesn't matter that they do it day in, day out, care label. Everything that you want on a product has to be, and it should be in your tech pack. And that's why it's really important to get it right. I know I've shown earlier, you can cobble together a way of getting things started. And I think that is a really good way of getting things started. Get yourself off the ball. Maybe you're not feeling confident in a tech pack. Maybe it's too much. Maybe it's something then that you farm out to somebody else, which is all well and good. Not everybody can, will be able to do that. But I just think when you do get somebody to do it, that you understand, right, well, I want everything in that tech pack. I want to when I go to sample stage, what I'm getting is all right, it's next slide there, please, Connor. It's just because you've got a quality tech pack doesn't mean your factory will nail it on the first sample. There's an art to garment manufacturing, so although the tech pack gives them a solid foundation to work on, there will most likely be tweaks and modifications once they review the design of the garment. And that's so true. It's just like, I've never gotten anything that I've gone, oh my God, that's just what I wanted. Yeah, we can all go home. In reality, it's not like that. And it's really, really hard. But if you've got a good tech pack, you've got something to go back with, so you've got something to go, no, the position's just on the chest, or, you didn't put a back neck label where I wanted it. And I've heard it so many times as well. Yeah, but that's what we did for other people. And it's like, well, that's not, oh God, I just spat. But that's not what I want for, my product. So, so it's something, you've got a solid foundation if you've got that garment and a tech pack. Sorry, Connor, can you? So these are the questions you need to be kind of asking the factory. So, what are your products' development fees, and what do they include? So if some of them do charge and some of them don't. Some of them will charge and then take it off your initial order, which is really good, But you need to know that up front. What type of product do they specialize in? And can they get an example of that, in a sample? So again, going back to it, you're not going to go to a pajama factory and ask them for an outerwear garment. It's just silly. So you start off, you're looking for outerwear, you go to outerwear factory. If you can't give me an estimate cost, can you at least give me a cost range? So that's, if you're giving them a tech pack, perhaps you've sent that on, and they're going, oh, we don't really know how much this is going to be. Right, you've sent me that outerwear jacket. How much is that, for instance? Kind of in terms, it's not going to be too far out of the realms of that. So it's just to give you a cost and something to gauge on. How and when do I pay for the product development and production? So it's again going back, it's asking those questions, making sure that, can I get the cost of this recouped? Because sampling is very expensive. It's like about €100 per, sample, which is a lot. So if you're, it is quite expensive. And then if it's something that's more technical, perhaps, then it just goes up and up. So it is quite expensive. Connor, can you just... So these are elements that you need to review once you get in the process. So you're looking for fabric quality. So do not approve fabric quality from a picture. Always ask for a sample to be posted. And I would get a couple of versions of fabrics. Am I that bad? Oh no, no. I know you're. That's okay. I'll let you go. But nobody else is going. That's it. Nobody else. Lock those doors. So if you're doing a fleece, and you have a weight that you want, so you're doing a 220-gram weight of a fleece. I would get maybe a couple of different weights as well at the same time. Don't be just, so that when the 220 comes and it's too thin or perhaps and you just don't like it, then you've got other versions to work off from the factory. And you're not then, oh, please, can you send me? Because these things take, even post, it takes a couple of weeks to come through. But definitely do not approve from a photograph. It's just, it's scary. Oh yeah, that looks heavy in the photograph, strike off, this would be if you're doing a print or if you're doing a pattern. It's really important to get the actual piece of that and to get the print on a square, so they can post that, that's no problem. Again, don't take it off a photograph. A photograph is just the color's not gonna be right. It looks lovely in the picture, and then you get it and you have 200 pieces with bright pink, and you thought, but it was a nice subtle dusty pink in the So do get a strike off so that you can confirm and approve it, and also just the feel of the print and make sure that you're happy with the finish. All your trims, get examples of that as well. Get an example of your zipper, your button, toggle. They can send you that. These are all things that are very easily, they can send them in the post. Get examples. If you're working with them for the first time, they may send you a photograph of a couple of different buttons, so I would just get them all sent, and then you can approve of their actual, because something might look really nice and heavy, and then all of a sudden you get it and it's real plastic and it feels really bad, and it's not nice. If you have gone to that effort with a garment and got their best production that you can, and perhaps the trims aren't up to standard, then, and most places do tend to work off available. To order trims it's very, very expensive. And if you're doing a short minimum run, they're not going to bring in, products or trims that are branded, usually anyway, because that costs a terrible lot of money. Obviously, if you've got the money, by all means, but you can go yourself and source all of these as well. And places like PV, Premier Vision, and Paris is a really good one, where you have all the trim manufacturers and suppliers there, and they would have it on show where you can select and get your own trims for your garments. But initially, when costs are you're trying to keep them to a minimum, to use their own, what's available is a lot more cost effective. So your first sample would be your development sample, and this would probably just be an available fabric. So it's just a purpose to evaluate the factory and make sure you're happy with their construction and how they put it together and everything. So the next slide, Connor, thank you. So the next sample after that would be your fit sample. Sometimes it's an available fabric, but I would push for this to be actually in the fabric that you've chosen and what you want. Because the fit of the garment does, if you've ordered it on a fleece and it comes on a different fleece, it will be a different way of moving, and it will be, either it could be too restrictive or it could be too baggy. It just, you need to have it actually in the fabric that you're going to be buying. The pre-production sample, this is your last time to alter anything. This is just before production. So it's to make sure that you're happy with everything, the actual materials, all the trims, and you can review the product and make any slight change. At this stage, you're really slightly changing things. Maybe you want to change the logo, the position of it, you can do at that point. Or, and again, that's then updating your tech pack and resending your tech pack so that all of those things are up to date. Connor, if you want to move on. Then their final production would be your gold seal sample. It's a production sample. This is taken out of your order. So this is what you're getting. So that should be just, you're actually getting it as a reference. You're getting it then to put in your wardrobe and have in your story then for your seasonal collections. You know what you're getting, and you can use that. That's what we tend to use for photography and any promotional material that you might want to produce as well. Connor? So we're just, Orla mentioned earlier about the critical path. This is what a critical path would look like. And so the idea of this is to map out exactly where your production starts and ends, almost, right? So you've worked out that the factory has told you, in July you will get your full production. It will be shipping at that point. Then you have to add on when it will actually arrive. And then give it 2 weeks because something will happen. And then that's when you're able to launch. So then you have to actually work that right back. So work that right back and work, when will your chums be approved? When will they be sending your gold seed sample, or not your gold seed sample because you got that at the end, but when will you get your first development sample, your fit sample, and you plan that all out into your production. And that's I've seen it myself where I've gone from launch and I've gone right back and I'm like, 3 weeks ago I should have had my, development sample. And then it's like, oh God, you realize then how behind perhaps you are, or, but there's a really good way of actually tracking where you should be at every moment. So you come in on a Monday and you go, you know what, I should be due my trums this week, and get on to the factory right away. Have you sent them? Why not? Where are they? So that you're keeping on top of it and understanding where you should be at that moment. So it is a really, really good idea. And I think, for most of us, the first season will be hard because you're almost learning from it. There'll be things that you haven't planned on, that you sort of go, oh, I never thought about that. And then maybe somebody calls you and says, we can do an editorial 3 weeks earlier, and then you're sort of rushing to get maybe, a pre-production sample so that you can actually use it for that. So it's just trying to time it and trying to get it working back. So Connor, yes. So we have a few useful resources here as well. So Connor, yeah. So finding your factory, basically. So Connor, if you want to just put them on. So we've got Alibaba, which is a really good resource, for China. And they actually, I know Orla mentioned about an agent. They actually have a facility on that so that they can source an agent for you so that they can, someone to check your goods. And the way they would get paid is if you say to them, right, I want you to, I've got a consignment, it's ready to be shipped. I want you just to make sure it's okay. So they'll be, they'll charge you to check 10%, and that's fine. If you want them to charge, they could charge you to check 50%, that's going to be more. And you want them to look at the whole lot, 100%, that's going to be even more money. So it's just dependent on whether you trust the factory. I think 30% of your stock would be a good area, if 30% of it, and they don't just tick, 30% of it off the top kind of thing. They would actually go on and randomly tick 30% just to check it. So, it should, realistically, if 30%'s okay, you've got a good chance that the rest is going to be good. Import Yeti is another website that's really good. You can actually, just to get the Kardashians on, so if you went on and put on Skims, it will tell you where they're manufacturing. So it's a really good way of seeing other brands and where they manufacturing so that you can actually start then, obviously, Google. You would go into Google and then maybe just get that manufacturer from there and get their contact details. I've noticed too, there's a few people on TikTok. This is a guy I follow, Chris China Business. And he just comes on and goes, if you're looking for shoes, this is the part of the whatever Chinese province that he has, that does that. So he's really good that way. I'm steady saving all them, but he hasn't done shapewear yet. And I'm like, oh, no. Local manufacturers, obviously, there's Mulford Shirt Mega Factory, and, there's different suppliers and different people around that can actually help perhaps you getting started, depending on what product you want to do. Made in London, which is another one. And they have good resources online as well. So Connor, if you want to just move to the next one, I think Orla's going to change the vibe here, and people were professional.
Does anybody that's getting the presentation at the end, these are all linked, so if they're of any interest or use to it, it'll be good. Makers Row would be US factories. Deirdre mentioned there the one at the end, the Made in London. That is a very good list of factories. They're all on there for UK production. There's a couple of links there in the middle. Well, Compass will give you, if you go in and type outerwear, you'll get factories in China and all different regions that produce but again, just tighten down your search to as close to the product that you want. couple of ones there, the kingpinning and the dropship, maybe we weren't sure if it would be Etsy businesses or things like that, but people that are maybe setting up their own Shopify or that might find those links useful. And the clothing manufacturers, again, the last one, there's more lists of brands or manufacturers out there. So there's lots of resources. If we can help anybody, if we can answer any questions, interested to hear where people are at, if they have product ideas in mind or still at studying stage, or has any of it been useful?
Brilliant.
Oh.
Good.
Yeah, the three we got.
And also,